Hello everybody, my name is Barry Johns. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Studio Talk. So recently I've been on this quest to kind of add more additional I/O to my studio. Before I made the recent transition into what I have right now, I used to be on Pro Tools HDX, and then from there moved down to the Carbon, which is kind of quasi HDX / native. And then I just got sick and tired of Avid's crap of gouging and just ripping its customers off by overcharging a ridiculous amount of money annually that simply is not justified. Got that rant out of the way. I've been on record for that quite a few times. And so I've completely moved out of that ecosystem 100% now and have now for the past month or so. And so now I'm looking to get back in there. So I sold all of my other gear I was using with Pro Tools HDX, and I've kind of bought all new gear. And so sitting over here in the rack, I've got an RME UFX Plus, Ferrofish UFX Plus that I absolutely love so far. It's got 12 in and 8 out on it as far as analog is concerned. Plus it's got MADI as well as 8 digital I/O on it. So in looking to expand this and get this back into additional I/O, which the reason I want to get that I/O is I have quite a bit of hardware incorporated here, and I've currently got it all wired to the Patchbay, but I'm finding myself having to do constant patching around to do things that I want, especially when I want to do hardware inserts. We'll talk about the difference between using this stuff pre and post conversion in just a second, but so, you know, I've got all of this gear that I want to be able to have connected as seamless as possible with minimal need to patch in and out, okay? And so I've been looking at the Ferrofish 16 Plus, the MADI version of that. It's only a couple $100 extra over the regular one. Seems to be a credible bang for the buck. Read lots of great things about it. So I've been watching out on Reverb and some other places out there, and I snagged one today. Got about $350 off the regular price, so I saved quite a bit of money. According to the description, it's brand new. It's from this year, so it's only been used a few months in a light use in a project studio, which another bonus, I guess. And so that's on the way. So I've been thinking a lot about, okay, once Sets gets here, I need to really have a full thought out plan about how I want to utilize that. You know, first initial reaction, I think, for many folks is, hey, I can get rid of the patch bays now. I should no longer need patch bays if I've got everything hooked up in a combination of the RME as well as the Ferrofish Pulse 16. And in theory, that's right. That's accurate. That gives me enough. Actually, it gives me just the right amount with only a couple of channels left to be able to do that. And I can do that. But what happens if I want to be able to patch things and not have it go in and out of conversion? Because if I've got it patched into the Ferrofish, every time it goes in and out of my DAW, it has to be converted from analog to digital and then digital back to analog. And then, you know, and then again, and over and over and over, depending on how many times I actually do that. Now, conversion's got a lot better. Back in the day, that used to be a problem. You'd really you'd find some somewhat noticeable degradation of your sound quality going in and out several times. But that's really not a major key anymore, a major factor anymore. But it does play a role. Your hardware is going to react differently on the way in when it's all analog and all those pieces are analog together versus going in and out of your DAW. Okay, so I want to have the ability to use hardware inserts, but believe it or not, most of my hardware I have in this studio is not for that purpose. Yes, I'll use it to some degree, but I want to limit it because of recall issues and things like that. All right, I use all of my hardware mostly for two general purposes. First and foremost, for tracking. I'm hitting my hardware on the way in, not only to really get that result I'm looking for once I start to mix, but also I want to incorporate the flavor and the character and the vibe of those transformers and all that, you know, glorious analog gadgetry that's inside each one of these boxes. I want to be able to capture that on the way in. And so, you know, if I'm using a compressor example, I'm not going to use a compressor in its full mode. I'm going to just touch it lightly enough. If it's on a singer, I want to give the singer the right vibe so they're singing so it feels natural. And an analog piece of gear can do that 1,000 times better than a plug-in that you're using that comes with your interface or whatnot. And so that's a huge plus for me. And then the other side that I use hardware for is on the mix bus. and that's kind of always there, and it doesn't get changed a whole lot. It gets changed somewhat, but not a ton of changes as everything else does. So I want to have the ability and the flexibility of being able to go, be able to incorporate this hardware seamlessly before I go back into Pro Tools and record, not Pro Tools. I'm sorry, I'm not in Pro Tools. Now I'm in Nuendo these days. But my DAW, before I go my interface in DAW, I want to incorporate that hardware before going in. So that posed a few challenges that I had to map out. And I'm going to talk about how I map that out, because I think the logic that I used for that can help some of you along the way as you're thinking about and contemplating what are various options you want to consider, so you don't find yourself having to redo it 2 and 3 times. So let's kind of take a break from this location. Let's head over to my racks, where I'll talk a little bit more about that and why. All right, I can't sit too long in this particular location. I'm sitting on an SKB case and it hurts my butt. So anyway, here you can see right over here is my Ferrofish UFX Plus, as you can see right here. And then over here are my existing Patchbays. I have 2 Patchbays, a Switchcraft and a Redco, that I've got all wired in. And so what I want to be able to do is to be able to go straight from the hardware out and in and out on anything I want to, and then also be able to just to keep that wired in automatically. So as an example, right, if I'm recording something, I've got 1176 in the insert, and I've already got it, I want to send it out as a hardware insert, then what I would have is example on the top of the Patchbay, which your outs are always on the top and your ends are on the bottom. That's pretty much an industry standard thing. So if I'm coming out, let's say channel 1 out of my RME Ferrofish, right? And I've got that wired into the first input on the Patchbay at the very top. That's the output of that. Then down below that, I have my 1176 input. So whatever's connected to the bottom is connected to my 1176 input. And let's say I've got 8 channels there. So then over here, at the top over here, I would have my 1176 output, right? 1176 output. And then back over here in this example, I would have my RME channel 1. So I'm coming out of 1, going into the 1176, and then out of the 1176 into 1. What a Patchbay will enable me to do is to be able to automatically set this up for what's called normaled. And what that means is whatever's connected to the top, okay, unless you do something to stop it, will automatically be connected to the bottom. So if I want to be able to connect my 1176 to my hardware insert via my Patchbay, all I have to do is just go out of channel 1 and come back in channel 1. And I don't have any patch cables. I need nothing on my Patchbay, okay? Nothing whatsoever. But let's say, as an example, I want to go out of that 1176 into an LA2A. Well, if I'm coming out of 1 and I come down here, which is the input of my 1176 as an example, then I would come over here to my output of my 1176, and then I would bring that back over here because my input of the LA2A is probably going to be over here. So I'm going to patch from over here the output, because I've got the output, I'm going to patch that over to here. And then now I'm going to come out of my LA2A and then go back into channel 1 on the RME. Okay, so let me recap. I'm going out channel 1, okay, out channel 1 into the input of my 1176, out of my 1176 into the input of my LA2A, out of the LA2A back into channel 1, and I've only had to use 2 patch cables for that, okay? And so to be able to do that, because one of them was technically already wired, didn't really need to do anything else, okay? So hopefully that makes sense to you. Now you've got normaled, half normaled, and non-normaled, okay? And so non-normaled, basically what that means is these are independent of each other. They are not connected in any way. You know, half normaled enables you to be able to Y out and do some other things. If you punch a cable into it, it severs the connection to be able to go down to the input and breaks that connection, okay? So anyway, I've got another video out there on how to wire a Patchbay and how to do that. If you're interested in doing that, strongly encourage you to go watch that particular video. But we're going to go over to an Excel spreadsheet that I created that helped me map all of this out to tell me all of the cables and everything else I was going to need, so I get inventory what I have, and then purchase or make. I make my own cables. Make my cables that I need if I'm short somewhere. So let's head over to the computer and take a look at that spreadsheet, okay? So let's head over there now. Okay, so here we are in Excel where I've created this spreadsheet to kind of help me go through the logic of everything. And so for right now, let's just focus on this top part right here, which is a Switchcraft 6425. Below that's a Redco. I'll get to that in a minute. That's a separate Patchbay, okay? I've got this blown up so we can all see this relatively easy, or certainly easier for me. And so we're up here at the 64 now. Where does the 64 come from? Well, you've got 1 through 32 jacks on the top, and then you've got 32 jacks on the bottom for a total of 64 jacks on the unit. I won't say I/O because you don't have to use it that way, although most people do. And I'll get to a second where I'm not using part of this that way, but I'll explain that in a second. So anyway, so up here we talked about that you know, if you're gonna use a hardware hardware insert as an example, and let's talk about, like I say, I'm coming out of output 3 as an example of my DAW is sending it out my interface out of output 3. So in this example, that's the pulse 3. So on the back of this unit, I've got my first 8 outputs of the pulse connected to the back of this Patchbay, which means that jack on the front of this is connected directly to that output of channel 3. So if I want to come output of channel 3 and I want to go into an 1176, well, you see down below, I've got 1176. So let's just kind of stop that for a second and talk about how this is laid out. If you notice across the first top sections of the so remember in a Patchbay, your top row is traditionally outputs, right? And your bottom row is inputs. That way, no matter what studio you go into, you automatically, logically think the way it's going to go instead of trying to figure out. You want to have your Patchbay wired the way most people have it wired. That's just a smart way to do it and get used to working that way. So outputs on top, inputs on the bottom. So if we got across the top, the first 16, I've got the 16 outputs of the pulse. Then down below, which are inputs, I've got the inputs connected to the first 16 pieces of hardware within my studio, okay? And then if you notice over here, you've got the outputs of the hardware going into the inputs of the pulse, right? So as an example, if I'm going to do a hardware insert out of 3, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to come out of the pulse channel 3. I'm going to go directly below this over here to the KT176, okay? And then out of here, I'm going to come over here, and out of the KT176 is going to go back into the input of pulse 3, okay? So that's the way that kind of works. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I'll go over that again to give some more clarification. But let's talk about this thing right here, which I've got indicating normaled. And what normaled means is whatever is connected to the top jack will automatically be connected to the bottom jack without using a patch cable. So in other words, coming out of channel 3, that signal output of channel 3 is going to automatically go down to the bottom, which is the input of the KT76, so no patch K needed. In the same sense, over here to the right, under channel 19 over here, you're coming out of the 1176, right? Again, that's just connected to the output of it, going back into the input of the pulse 3. So in other words, if you go out your hardware insert 3, there's no patch cables needed whatsoever. But let's say, as an example, you want to be able to come out of that 1176 and go into an LA2A, okay? So here we would go out of output 3, right? And then it would automatically feed down to the 1176 because that just happens to be right below it. And then we would come out of our 1176 over to the right over here, okay? And then we would plug in a patch cable right here. And then we would patch that in over here to the LA2A, right over here, right? So a patch cable coming from here over to here, right? And then out of the LA2A, you'll come back over here, out of the LA2A over here under 20, right? You'll have a patch cable coming out of there, going back into the input of channel 3. That way you're going in and out of the same channel. Now, like I said before, Pro Tools requires you to go in and out of the same interface channel, okay? So that's why you would want to patch that. But if you were doing this in Nuendo as an example, or a Cubase, you can use any combination of IOs you want. So you could have left that no need to patch that input back in and just come back in on channel 4 of the pulse versus channel 3, because that LA2A is automatically routed to that channel 4 of the pulse. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I want to talk about one unique thing a couple of unique things that I've done here before I go down below. Both I have a WA73 EQ, which is Warm Audio's version of their Neve slash EQ channel strip, and I also have an HA73 EQ, which is Heritage Audio's clone of that same type thing. Well, both of those units not only have the input and the output, which gets processed through the chain, okay? You can also go back into it and use a hardware insert to where you're just going through the EQ. So I've also got that wired into my Patchbay in the event that I want to be able to just patch into the insert of the EQ of that, and then foregoing, of course, the microphone preamp. And so that's another neat thing that I've automatically got wired into this, which is the same as the rest of my hardware. So that's another thing that you'd want to consider. Otherwise, you're going to be back behind this gear unplugging and plugging in things. And what's the whole point of having a Patchbay if you're going to get back there and do that, all right? And so, all right, so hopefully you figured out how that Switchcraft is laid out and the logic behind it. Let's go down to the Redco here for a second. Okay, so now we're down here to the Redco, okay? So let's take a look at that and talk about some unique things that I've done here. First thing I want to draw attention to is first you hit right here, you see these channels here have NN stand for me, which stands for non-normaled, okay? And so we talked about normaled before. Normaled before means whatever is connected to the jack on the top, okay, will automatically be connected to the jack directly below it without needing a patch cable, okay? That's what non-normaled means, okay? And so that's the way most of the time you're going to set up a Patchbay. When you're in non-normaled, okay, non-normaled, that basically means that the jack on top is in no way connected to the jack on bottom. They're completely independent of each other and require patching in and out to access whatever's connected to them. That's where if you wanted to break the rules of outs on top and ends on bottom, depending on what you needed to do, that might be the place that you do that at. Just you'd want to make sure that's clearly marked, okay, for everybody to understand. So now that you understand that, okay, so now we're going to see a couple of things that I've got here. I've got a Slate VM1 as an example, just a piece of hardware I don't want to have to patch anything in and out of. I've got that connected to the Patchbay, as well as an Aratone dedicated box that goes with that mic. And so I've got those connected into there. I'm going to require patch in and out. Down below, I have the inputs to various microphone preamps that I have in the studio over here. And then I'll talk about this Kemper and HX effects in a second, but let's go over here. And now over here in channel 11, you're seeing basically all of these mic preamps, the inputs of them, you're seeing the outputs of them over here. And this is where those are automatically wired into inputs. For example, these Great Rivers and everything, they're automatically going into the RME 3 through 8. So I'm utilizing all of the channels on that without requiring me to patch anything. Okay, so that way I just plug a mic into the front of the Patchbay, and that automatically connects it to the Great River mic preamp. And then, of course, the output of that is automatically going to connect me into input 3. So I just set my input to input 3 in my DAW and hit record, and bam, I'm off to the races, okay? Well, you may say, well, hey, Barry, I want to put a compressor on that before that happens. Well, I'd say, that could be a good idea. So what you're going to do is you're going to do a patch cable out of this Great River, that says mic input, but it's actually the output of the thing. But anyway, so the Great River output, this is the output of the mic pre. You're going to put a patch cable into there, and you're going to go up here into the input of the, let's say the 1176 there, right? And then you're going to come over here and find the output of the 1176, and you're going to take a patch cable from there, and you're going to bring it back down into where? Into the input of RME input 3, and there you go. That's how you do it. Okay, so now you can basically see you can route anything that you want however you want, okay? So one of the reasons, like we said before, that I didn't want to wire everything directly into the pulse, which I could have, and completely bypass patch bays altogether, is that would take away my flexibility to be able to patch in any analog hardware, any combination of units before I got to the converters on that way in. It would take away my ability to do that. So the only way really to do that is going in and out of the converters, even in total mix, whether I tried to patch and route that even before it hits, regardless, it's still hitting conversion no matter how you look at it. And so this gives me the flexibility to do both. I originally thought, hey, I'll just sell those. I would just sell the patch bays, and that could help fund the Ferrofish. But then after I thought about this, no. Now, one last thing I want to cover before I leave Excel here, and you can, again, the next thing I had to think about is make sure that I had enough cables for everything and the right types of connections, right? Again, all these patch bays are DB25 connectors on them, which if you're going to do a patch bay, I strongly recommend, if for only one reason. It's such a pain in the butt when you've got the like 1/4 inch connections on the back and you move it and you unplug it and something comes undone. It always proved to be a nightmare for me, even though patching in works just as good, okay, just manually on the front of those as it does a DB25, which are a lot more expensive. So anyway, I had to make sure I had all the right cables. Of course, I'm already using a lot right now, plus I have some extra, and this will tell me whether I need to do some things differently. Now, where I'm going to be on the short end of the stick, and I'm going to have to make some cables, and that is because the pulse I/O is all 1/4 inch balanced. It's not DB25. I wish it was DB25. It would make my life easier, but it's not, okay? And so what I did here is I took, for example, of the Switchcraft, this tells me what type of cables I need. So 1 through 16, which are my top output, which are all my pulse outputs, right? I just need a DB25 to 1/4 inch balance. So I need a total of 16 channels, either one 16-channel snake or two 8-channel snakes to be able to get that done and taken care of. Down for 3348, which are my bottom row, which are my inputs, okay? Here, because of the hardware, most of my hardware can either accept 1/4 inch or XLR as I/O. I prefer XLR, you have a better connection, but depending on how much I end up with in my inventory, I can either use a combination of DB125 to 1/4 inch balance or XLR female balanced, of course. Of course, that would be balanced anyway. And then, of course, on my 17 through 32 of my outputs on top, they can be a combination of the XLR or the 1/4 inch. And then my 49 to 64, again, these are my pulse inputs. Of course, they have to be 1/4 inch balanced. Over to the Redco, I basically went through the same thing, making sure that I had the right combination of either DB25 to XLR female, DB25 to XLR male, or DB25 to 1/4 inch balanced. Make sure I have that and be able to make up any difference so I can get going right away. This is where it gets pricey in this world, and that's why I highly recommend you make your own cables, and I will be doing a video about that soon. But for right now, let's head on back and let's continue to talk about this. All right, so hopefully this now paints a picture for you that you can get a feel on at least the steps that I went through and the things that I consider when incorporating analog hardware into my workflow. As I stated before, I want to have the flexibility and ease of use, quite frankly, and that's what some of this stuff does. It just makes your time more manageable, and the ease of use of being able to easily patch in any particular analog gear in any combination, no matter how many pieces I want to go into, typically not that many, but whatever I want to go into, I want to keep that all in its analog glory before it hits the converters on the first time going in, okay? But then once I'm in, I want to have the flexibility to go back out. You know, I want to utilize the existing hardware that I have over using a plugin where it makes sense. And those are obviously going to be on what I'll call your prime real estate tracks. Obviously, your lead vocal is the prime Mac Daddy of them all. then followed up by your kick and your snare, especially your snare. Those two things, especially that snare and that vocal, are the driving force behind any particular song, regardless of the genre. And so I'm definitely going to incorporate it there. There's a few other places, like on a drum bus, I may incorporate stereo compressor on that drum bus in analog mode when I'm going out to finally mix that bad boy down. So I want to be able to do that. So if I've got it wired in a way where it's automatically put in the order that it needs to be without me doing anything to use as a hardware insert, but when I want to patch on and do any configuration that I want to, I want to be able to do that as well. And that's what I'm going to be able to accomplish by going the route we've talked about today. Now, I realize most of you probably don't have a need today to do this, or you may never have a need to do this. You may be settling perfectly in the box, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Nothing wrong with that. I just enjoy this aspect of recording a lot. So anyway, I hope you like the things I talk about here on this channel. If you do me a favor, hit that like button and then that subscribe button and that notification bell so you know when I got a new video out. I'd appreciate you coming back and checking out more videos. I got a lot of them out there. I'm closing. This is coming to the end of July 2022, which is the 1-year anniversary for this channel, and it's grown pretty quickly, and I want to thank all of you for that. I've been very pleased and very blessed, and sometimes amused, like, how in the world are these people watching me, and why are they doing it? Well, I guess at the end of the day, maybe I've got a few things that I can share, mostly all the screw-ups and everything I've had along my way where I've had to learn the hard way. Maybe I can help you avoid some of those bumps in the road, but at least giving you something to think about. So do me a favor, leave some comments down below. Love interacting with you folks. Love seeing you guys interact with each other. Let's try and keep a positive community here. Let's not try to be negative. Even if you have something, maybe you don't like something I said, I'm going to be critical, just be cool about it. Don't got to be a jerk, okay? That's all I'm saying. You can get your point across without going on the attack mode and getting a hatchet straight down the front of my head like some of you people like to do. But anyway, I let that stuff slip right on off, okay? But anyway, until next time, hope every one of you have a great day. Bye-bye.